Hello and welcome to the Grizzled Warmaster. Today we're going to take a look at Kragnos. I know it's been a little while since I've done a video. I did take a vacation and honestly I didn't feel like it was a good idea to make any kind of like tactics or strategies or really review videos of any type prior to us knowing more about third edition, as you know, some of that might have become meaningless with point changes, with rule changes, stuff. But we did get some additional information about Kragnos, so I think I'll go over that. We also know that we're going to be getting some more information Saturday about the release of third edition in general. So I suspect that pretty soon we will be getting quite a bit more information about what's going on with Age of Sigmar, what the changes are going to be leading into third edition, and there'll be a lot more to talk about and to make videos about. But today we're going to focus on the big guy, the new kid on the block here, Kragnos, the god of thunder or earthquakes, I think it is. Here we got a good comparison shot with him and a Son of Behemoth's model close to each other. You can see that their bases are going to be about the same size. While he's a little smaller in scale, ultimately with his horns and whatnot, he's close to the size of a Mega Gargant. He had a couple of other things here, but the big news we got was they released his Warscroll. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at Kragnos Warscroll. First thing you'll notice, he's got 18 wounds with a 2-up save. That is pretty good. I expected him to have more wounds when you compare him to a Mega Gargant, who literally has almost double the number of wounds. But with that 2-up save, he is considerably more resilient than they are. And I think generally he's going to do more damage than them. We also see his movement starts at 10, moves down to 7. Here's another big thing. He has to lose half his wounds before he starts degrading, which is cool. I wish they'd do that with all the monsters, and maybe they will moving forward. But you'll notice I don't believe they did that in the Vampire Counts book, the Soulblight Gravelords, nor any of the other releases prior to that. So this might be kind of a one-off representing his uniqueness, or maybe as we move forward and new books are released, maybe this will become the norm for that, because this is how they do it in 40k. Vehicles and monsters and stuff that degrade in 40k, they do not degrade until they've lost half their wounds. So I hope that's the trend moving forward. So that gives him at his top bracket a mighty 15 attacks that are all pretty reliable with 3s to hit. He's a hero, so he could give himself rerolling 1s if you wanted. 2-up to wound on all of his attacks that never changes. That's not one of the things. In fact, only one of his attack abilities is tied to his wounds characteristic. So he'll lose 3 hoof attacks throughout the course of being wounded. So that's not that much, especially when they're only 2 damage, -1, 2 damage. The 2 big attacks, his Tuskbreaker, which is his shield, and his mace, they are going to stick around. He will have those 9 attacks the whole time. In fact, he only drops down to 12 attacks at his lowest bracket. So I think this is going to make him a great damage dealer. But let's move on to let's keep this Bellow of Rage in mind here, because that'll be here. But let's go ahead and move over to the rest of his Warscroll, which gives him some of his abilities. Let's look. He's got the Destruction, Monster, Hero, and Kragnos keywords, and that's it. And we have this little bit, which we knew already, he can be included in any Destruction army regardless of points restrictions. He cannot use or benefit from any of that army's allegiance abilities, which is a big weakness. And you can't include any mercenary units in that army, which I don't think many people were anyways, at least not competitively. So that's cool. I think that's good that he can be there, but the fact that he's just this generic destruction creature who doesn't gain any abilities or doesn't gain anything from joining any armies does drop him down a bit. But let's go ahead and see what he has. Bellow of Rage. This is, one could say, almost a drawback, and it could be a drawback. It's also can be a powerful ability. So at the end of any phase, if any wounds were allocated to this model in that phase and not negated, roll a dice for each other unit and each defensible terrain, which they later define down here as anything that can be garrisoned, that's within 6 inches. If you roll the die and it's equal to or greater than the Bellow of Rage value shown on this model's damage table, that he deals with them a D3 mortal wounds, or the defensible terrain is demolished. If the terrain features demolished, is no longer considered to be defensible terrain, so you don't remove it, and then all units garrisoned it must leave, and it can no longer be garrisoned, but models can move in onto and across it. So it's there. It just, and then if there are people in that garrison, you have to roll like they're, again, like the 40k, like they are being forced to disembark, and on a 1 they're slain. I think this happens with the Caradron Overlord ships too. If they're forced to disembark from a ship that's been destroyed, you roll a die for everybody who's in it, and on 1 the model's slain. And then you have to set them up there. But if we go back to that chart, it starts at a 5 up and goes down to a 2. So the more wounded he is, the more likely this ability is to trigger. So you roll a d6 for each other unit. You don't just roll it once. You roll for each unit. If the roll is equal to or greater than the Bellow with Rage, then they take damage. This could be trouble for your own army in early turns if you're hit by shooting attacks. In the unlikely case that a magical attack gets through, it's every phase, so you could be handing out mortal wounds to your own army. So you're going to want to be careful where you set Kragnos up. You might want to set him up away from the rest of your army so he does not cause them mortal wounds. Then you got Destroyer of the Draconith Empire, Star Drakes, Drakos, and Dracolines. He can reroll charges and hit rolls against them. Bald is within. It's not against them. It's while any of them are within 12 inches. So he can be attacking a different target. But if they are within 12 inches, he can reroll charge rolls and hit rolls. So, all right. I shouldn't say hate. I'm not a big fan of these situational bonuses, because they calculate these into the points, but it is unlikely that he will encounter these things very often. So it's an interesting little buff, but it doesn't mean a lot. All right, Rampaging Destruction. After this model makes a charge move, you can either roll a dice for each enemy unit that is within 1 inch of this model, or you can pick one enemy monster within 1 inch of the model and roll 2d6. So the first one is just your standard, hey, he made a charge. On a 2-up, he does d6 mortal wounds, so that's pretty significant. So that's really cool. But if it's a monster, he rolls 2d6, and then if he rolls a 7, which is the most common number you're going to roll statistically, but anyways, if he rolls a 7, nothing happens. On any other roll, you multiply the 2 dice together. That means you can do anything from 1 mortal wound to 36 mortal wounds to a monster. That is crazy. So you do not want to fight this guy with a monster. Or you don't want to let this guy charge a monster, I should say. If you have monsters, you want to make sure that you're in a position where they're going to get the charge on him, not the other way around. So you have to be careful with screening units and things like that. Icon of Destruction, we'd already seen this one. Add 1 to the bravery characteristic of friendly destruction units wholly within 12 inches. It's actually kind of a nothing ability, because if you are a destruction player, you likely don't want to keep units wholly within 12 inches of him, or you'll suffer the Bellow of Rage ability. So, again, much like the Destroyer of the Draconith Empire, this feels like a negative because it's adding to his point value, but is either not going to be effective or might actually be a detriment to your army if you try to take advantage of it and then suffer the Bellow of Rage ability. And finally, the Shield and Violet, which again, we saw this. Each time this model is affected by a spell or an endless spell ability, you can roll 3d6. If the roll is greater than the casting value of the spell or endless spell, ignore the effects. So, when I first saw this guy, I thought, this looks pretty good, except for the fact that he has no way to resist mortal wounds. But this spell takes care of most mortal wounds, because most of the mortal wounds you're going to be getting are from spells. There are people like the Lumineth, Skinks with their, the priest buff that they get, different dead units that, hit rolls of 6, cause a mortal wound or so. So there are ways to deal mortal wounds that don't have anything, I think just about every army has a way to do mortal wounds in combat. But the vast majority of mortal wounds, and the ones you have the least influence over how and when they're going to come into play, come from spells, which he will largely be able to ignore, except from really powerful casters like Teclis, Nagash, Croak, maybe Archon, who might be able to cast at high enough levels that he doesn't always resist them. Remember, his base, the average roll is 10.5. So he, on average, he does have to roll greater than. So he has to roll just slightly above average to resist Teclis casting spells on his 4 spells at 10 up. If you consider the average casting roll is 7, then the average casting roll for Croak or Archon is 9. And for Nagash is 10, I believe. I think he has a +3. So they are, on average, he is going to beat them and be able to get to ignore their spells. So, and that's if either of them spikes, that it could change slightly, but he is going to be able to resist the vast majority of spells, let's say. So realistically, what this guy is pointed at is what's going to really matter. There are a few things that are disappointing about him. One, he, as far as we know, depending on if the rules change or whatnot, he is 1 model, and he counts as 1 for holding objectives. That's disappointing. I think all monsters need to count as more than 1 model. 2+ armor save, really good when you think that the best Rend gets is -3. So even against the most potent weapons out there, he's going to have a 5 up. More commonly, he's going to have anywhere from a 2 to 4 up. So this guy can really wreck house. I personally would send this guy against hordes and against, the low end of elite infantry, and he will just wreck their day. The few that might get hits through are going to have to worry about his Bellow of Rage. But yeah, this guy I would put up against 60 Grots, because of how they would be able to pile in. Yes, they could potentially get some mortal wounds across to him, but that's going to trigger his Bellow of Rage. It's unlikely they're going to be able to do enough to really seriously harm him. And with the potential to do 24 wounds with just his mace, he's going to run through a 60-man Grot unit in 2 turns, probably. Especially when a bunch of them will probably run. So I think this guy is going to be great. He'd be great to charge a monster with. The only people I see him struggling against or not really being very useful against are KO, who could just ignore him. They can just move away from him, allowing him to, with 10-inch move, what he could do is like camp a center objective and say, yeah, if you want to take this, you're going to have to come actually deal with me. I'm going to ignore your guns. I'm going to ignore your cannons. The one thing I do wish they had on this guy is some healing mechanic. Because if I am not mistaken, not many destruction armies have any way to heal. And those little ways they do have to heal trigger only on ones with their own keywords. That's one thing I wish they had done with this guy, is give him the keywords. Not to necessarily give him the army's allegiance ability, but just say, hey, whatever destruction army he joins, he gains that keyword so he can be affected by their spells. So that, somebody like, or their beats for, get the fix 'em beat. Or, man, even get the get 'em beat. That's only really the only one that would matter. Or give him the +1 damage from those guys. Anyways, I mean, there is a lot to consider with that, and maybe that would be insanely overpowered. But in my opinion, everything's going to depend on how many points this guy's worth. And I have a sneaky suspicion he's going to be over 400 points, maybe up to 500, but I don't think he should go over 400. He is not Mega Gargant good. He does more damage potentially than a Mega Gargant, but he doesn't have the built-in rule that things that would slay him outright don't, which Mega Gargants do. He doesn't count as more than one model, which Mega Gargants do. He has half-ish the number of wounds Mega Gargants do, but yeah, better armor. And this resisting spells, very good. So he's different. But they have some other abilities, like the ability to walk over models and terrain that he doesn't have. He doesn't even have the, the Blood Knight's ability to just, I leave combat with you and deal mortal wounds when I do it. He would have been a great candidate for that. So anyways, realistically, he looks good. I like the direction they're going. I want monsters to go this way. It's just, will the price justify what he can do? But there you go, guys. There is Kragnos for you. I will try to put out another video either this weekend or early next, going over everything we learned this weekend, and I will include on that the new peaks we got at Lord Croak. So there you go, guys. Thank you very much for tuning in. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and if you would, please share with a friend. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.